So welcome everyone to our webinar today, and it's lovely just to see you filling up the chat with where you're calling from today, and really nice to have you with us. And my name's Jemima Parker. I work as the Environment Officer for the diocese. So just to take you through what we're going to be covering in this webinar. First of all, we'll have an introduction from Jonathan Wood, who's our Diocese Secretary, and then we'll be handing over to the Green Journey team, Kevin Lumley and Craig Hogg, for a presentation from them. Then Ian Fletcher is going to just talk us through the relationship between the diocese and Green Journey, and then I'm going to take you through some actions for saving energy this winter, and then we'll move to a time of questions and answers. If you have a question, do please pop it in the chat so that you don't forget it and we capture that, or you can wait till the end and ask it your question at the end. Let me just introduce our speakers briefly to you today, or we'll go round, but these are our speakers for today, so you know who they are. And I'll just stop sharing my screen so that they can each say hello, and then we can move to them speaking. So I'll come back to Jonathan because we can move straight into him speaking. So Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin of Green Energy Consulting and Green Journey.
Thanks Kevin, and then Craig, and then to Ian.
Hi, good afternoon everybody. My name is Craig Hogg and I'm the Ecclesiastical Account Manager here at Green Journey.
Thanks, Craig. Ian?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ian Fletcher. I chair the Green Journey Scrutiny Committee for the Diocese of Leeds.
Thanks, Ian. And for those of you who've come in a little later and missed my introduction, I'm Jemima Parker. I work as the Environment Officer for the Diocese of Leeds. And then I'm going to hand over to Jonathan Wood to introduce himself and to just say a few words to get us started.
Thanks, Jemima, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I've just literally run out of a finance committee meeting to come and speak to a number of familiar faces and familiar names, and some new ones. And I'm really glad that people have given up some time to join us today. I think the fact that you have is testament, I guess, to the fact that this is an issue that's affecting all of us. It's something that's going to have a profound impact on our churches and on our church life, as well as impacting us personally. And really what I wanted to say today was that the Green Journey is something that Jemima and Ian and other members of the Diocese of Leeds have really championed and worked incredibly hard to bring about. And we're really grateful for the support that we've had from Green Energy Consulting in driving that. And I just wanted you encouraged to listen, to ask the questions, and to not be concerned about sort of stepping into looking at exploring further. It's something that we collectively really do endorse. And, you know, if we were currently in America and we were in the campaigning world, I'd be looking down the screen at the moment going, I endorse this ad. And I think that's really sort of where I'm at on it, is that please do listen, please do ask all the questions, please do make it really hard work for those presenting to sort of think through the detail of where you're at, and please, you know, take that away and consider it and actively discuss it. And we are acutely aware of the pressures that are facing parishes, and I hope to next week write to everyone to explain how we're going to distribute some national church funding. So the Diocese of Leeds has received £724,000 from the national church to share with parishes to help tackle some of the challenge. £724,000 is a huge amount of money, but it's also not very much money when we split it between everyone and look at the challenges. So it won't It won't be enough to save the day, so to speak, but it will be hopefully something to help ease the pressure. And as I say, I hope to write out next week as to how we're going to do that and get that money out before Christmas. Doing so, we will try and be as equitable as possible, but obviously, it would be naive to assume that everyone will be happy with how we do it, but we will do our best to be as fair and equitable as we go through. But yeah, just to say thank you for joining, and do take the opportunity to ask the questions, and I will hand you back to Jemima.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Great to have you with us this afternoon. And I'm going to swiftly hand on to Kevin and Craig to take us through their presentation.
Thank you, Jemima, and thank you, Jonathan, for the kind words. So today we're going to look at, hopefully that's showing on your side okay, we're going to look at some price drivers to the energy market and try and work out why prices are at record levels in 22. We're going to look at the outlook for 2023 onwards, the best that we can. We'll discuss the current setup of Green Journey. My colleague Craig will pick that up. And finally, we'll run through some questions that have been submitted prior to, and there's going to be an open floor later on for any other questions which haven't been sent in before. So to begin, before we look at the market conditions historically and currently, I want to touch upon the main price drivers of energy. The main driver in itself is always going to be supply and demand, but this is impacted by the below factors. So geopolitical tension is a key factor and one that's driven much of the movement in price since 2021 through to 2022. You can look at the invasion of Ukraine and fears over gas supply security, which have driven prices to record levels. Temperature is another key driver. So in any standard year, temperature and traditional seasonality reigns supreme. So that's the notion that in the winter delivery period, when temperatures are cold, the heating demand causes an increase in gas demand and prices increase by the same token. In summer, the opposite is true. Another driver is renewable generation. When the wind's blowing and wholesale prices tend to drop as a result, but this is more day-to-day, or it might last a couple of days or a week, but it's not long-term. Another key driver is outages, production plants, or problems with interconnectors that supply electricity between continents. This causes a reduction in supply, and unless the demand can be filled elsewhere, for example, through renewables above, the wholesale price will increase. So if we look at this slide here, this provides a historical context of energy prices from 2005 to 2019. With the exception of 2008, you can see that prices have been relatively stable, with traditional seasonality showing throughout the years. You can see the financial crisis, Lehman Brothers going bust in there, gas storage fears in 2019, a global LNG glut in 2010 as well, which have driven prices, but there's been nothing too extreme. If we narrow this down a bit further to 2010 to 2019, you can see that the range of price movement is quite small and constrained, relatively speaking. This will become clearer when I add in the subsequent years to the graph. So 2019 to 2020, as we're all aware, we had the global pandemic that caused pandemic-related demand destruction. So by locking down our country and much of the developed world, there was a reduction in usage compared with what was expected by suppliers, by the industry, which resulted in an oversupply of gas. It caused prices to fall to record levels. As lockdown restrictions lessened and traditional seasonality, cold temperature came into play, prices started to tick upwards. Now, if we pull back again to 2019 to 2021, you'll start to see what I mean about the scale of the increases. I've added some drivers in grey onto the graph to show what's been pushing prices. So in early 2021, we had the Beast from the East 2, and at the same time, there was a bidding war with Asian markets for LNG, which is gas that can be transported on cargo ships. It's where we get quite a significant amount of our gas from in the UK. Shortly afterwards, we had the Suez Canal incident, which caused a backlog of LNG cargo ships, which caused prices to rise. There was ongoing gas shortage fears throughout the year. And I think if we look back from the context of 2022, you could argue there may have been a Russian campaign to shorten gas supplies throughout Europe in preparation for the invasion of Ukraine. It culminated in September 21, where there was damage to an interconnector with the EU, electricity interconnector. Around the same time or the same period, we saw circa 25 electricity suppliers and gas supplies fail in the United Kingdom too. At the end of the year, on the 22nd of December, there were cracks found, only small cracks in French nuclear assets. And at the time, because it was the middle of winter, that caused quite a severe price spike. However, when I pull forward to 2022, you'll see that this is that same cracks found in French nuclear asset spike. What followed was the preamble to the invasion of Ukraine, troops entering the country. Throughout the summer of 22, there was uncertainty as to whether Russia was going to continue to supply gas to the continent. Nord Stream 1, the main pipeline, it was threatened to be turned off, and the capacity slowly dropped from 100% to 80, 60, 40, 20, 10%. And then eventually it was closed down in August permanently. The government support has helped to reduce the price artificially. It has been a milder end to the year so far as well, which has caused demand not to spike. And to pull out again to a 24-month view, just to provide context on the scale of the increases. So here are all the drivers, which I've discussed previously, but you can see the scale of this increase here. And that's where we're at price-wise at the minute. The government support's driven it down, but even at this point, at the time of speaking, you can see how far ahead we are. We'd have to drill back to January 22 to get to the same price point. And if I just quickly scroll back to the graph of 2019 to 2021 here, you can see comparatively how high the market has risen to that point. In terms of the outlook for 2022 onwards, we've summarised some of the factors that may cause prices to remain high. There's a lot here, and you'll be provided with the slides afterwards to touch upon some of the short-term factors that will impact upon prices. You've got the sabotage to the Nord Stream pipelines, which means that it's unlikely that gas can flow from them. Russian gas is in essence embargoed regardless. However, we did fill up gas storage across the EU from Russian sources throughout much of 2022. We don't have that option likely for next year. There's been unplanned gas outages throughout the year, French nuclear outages. The temperatures for the outflow of water from nuclear plants has been too high, which means that the amount of generation from French nuclear plants has been low throughout the year. If we have a very cold winter, as has been suggested by National Grid, there may be blackouts or an undersupply of gas. Oil and coal prices are soaring. Midterm, nuclear capacity in Germany is closing. A key LNG, that's gas that could be transported, facility in the USA called Freeport is having delays restarting. And it was hoped that that would be up and running sooner to allow for more gas to flow to the continent. Long term, there's an incredible lack of UK gas storage capacity. Our biggest storage really is the pipes into which the gas is already sitting, ready to be used. There's objections to fracking, in my opinion, rightly. UK nuclear plants are closing for 2028, and the time taken to get new plants online is quite long, and there's always delays in the process. New gas uses across industry, for example, shipping fuel, and new electricity uses across industry like electric vehicles and heating will change our demand profile. And finally, there's nationalism and protectionism of gas and electricity, which we may see in the future, hopefully not this winter. From a more optimistic viewpoint, here's some of the bullish factors. So there's been quite a lot of LNG deliveries to the EU, more than previous years. Again, that's gas can be shipped on cargo ships. There's been less demand in Latin America due to Brazilian storage levels being high. We've got full capacity on the North Sea link interconnected to the continent. Chinese lockdowns are suppressing demand, the Asian demand. So I mentioned before about the bidding war with Asia that we had. If the same thing happened now, it would be incredibly difficult to source LNG cargoes because it just becomes a case of who can pay more on the spot market. Norwegian gas imports are up. Germany's keeping coal online this year. Midterm, you've got Rough storage plant coming back online in the UK, which will give us more capacity for storage. Japan's considering nuclear restarts, which will dampen LNG requirements. We've got renewables expanding, the use of batteries, and even longer term, we've got Hinkley Point C, more offshore wind capacity, gas boilers to be banned, which will start to reduce gas demand, more efficient infrastructure, additional supplies. So Turkmenistan has I believe it's the third highest reserves in natural gas, if they can supply it. There's new gas fields in Iran, Eastern Africa, nuclear fusion, and then unconventional gas can be looked at in the future. I saw a question come in about the vertical axes on this, by the way. This one is pence per therm for the gas market one here. For the ones where it says source Ofgem, when you get sent this through, it's either pence per therm for gas or it's pound per megawatt for electricity. In terms of the Green Journey basket itself, Craig will provide a bit more detail on that in the next slide and what's offered. But the initial basket was last contracted in March 2019 with a commencement date of September 2020, and it runs until September 2023. On this graph, we've overlaid the date upon which the basket was agreed here. The basket went live September 20 here. And this really, although simplistic, shows the costs that have been avoided through the fixed contracts that were agreed with SSE and Crown Gas. Obviously, the unit rates that you pay vary depending on the type of meter that you've got. There's a lot of different variables that go into it. However, the unit rate for electricity was circa 15 pence per kilowatt hour. To put in context, 2022 rates, if you were agreeing today, would be 80 to 95 pence per kilowatt hour without government support. On the gas side, the unit rate is circa 3 to 4 pence per kilowatt hour with Crown Gas. Again, in the same example, you're looking at 15, 25 pence per kilowatt hour for gas rates currently. And now I shall hand over to my colleague Craig to discuss what Green Journey offers.
Thanks, Kevin. So first of all, I'd just like to begin with a bit of an introduction to the scheme for those of you who may not have heard about us and are not aware of what we've been doing with the diocese over the last few years. So we started Green Journey back in 2015 with the Diocese of Leeds. And since then, we've been working with them to provide churches and religious organisations the opportunity to reduce their carbon footprint and to assist them on their journey to a greener future. Since the start of the scheme, we're now working with around 250 churches within the diocese alone. Wider to that, we are working with about 1,500 churches throughout the UK, a number of dioceses, as well as the United Reformed Church nationally, the Baptist and the Methodist churches as well. So as part of the scheme, there is the main element, the quick win, if you like, which is looking at renewable energy. So through the scheme, we can provide assistance and guidance on how to transition to renewables to help reduce your carbon footprint in line with diocesan guidance and also central church as well. The next element of the scheme is energy auditing and sustainability advice. So as part of the scheme, we will offer a complimentary energy audit to any churches who haven't yet had one. I know we may have spoken with some of you in the past, but there's many churches out there still who we haven't had the opportunity to work with. Now, at times like this, with energy costs rising, the audits that our team can provide you with are a really valuable tool to get an understanding of how and where your energy is being used, but more importantly, what you can do to reduce your energy consumption and reduce your bills. The audits themselves, they would cover a number of areas. So that would look at things like your current heating and lighting systems, electrical appliances on site, and they would provide a range of recommendations and suggestions on what can be done to reduce the consumption and to improve efficiency. In addition to that, there are a number of benefits that the scheme will bring. Of course, for energy procurement, the amount of churches that we work with really allows us to command a much better price with the energy suppliers due to the volume of energy that we have on supply with them. And additionally, as part of this scheme, there's a whole range of back office support that is available to you, including full account management throughout the duration of your energy contract. So myself and the team, we're here for any questions, queries, concerns regarding the energy contract, billing, things like that. We can also advise churches on VAT and climate change levy, which when we started the scheme, we found there were many churches who were paying the incorrect levels of VAT and subsequently CCL as well. So we can work with the energy suppliers to claim that back for you, meaning that you're essentially only paying what you need to be paying. Another sort of few things that we do as part of the scheme as well, smart metering, full account audits as well. So there are a number of positives to the scheme and how we can work with you to help you navigate the complexities of the challenging energy markets at the moment and really provide the advice and guidance that you need to get through this process. I hand back to Kevin.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm going to cover off some questions that were asked in the previous presentation. So the first question was considering the residual carbon footprint of green gas and the extent to which it brings us closer to carbon neutral. In short, at the moment, green gas or biogas is the best option that's available. And it will remain so until hydrogen is introduced into the grid, but it does have its own associated problems, and the generation of hydrogen and how it is generated impacts on how green it is. For example, if it's through electricity. There's a very small nominal residual carbon footprint associated with biogas, and it'll vary by production facility, but comparative to natural gas, it's far superior and far greener. The second question that we had was to do with fixed elements within a contract changing. So in theory, although it seems to be a secret within the industry, everything can change in a contract, no matter how fixed it is or unfixed it is. It's just that it's rare to happen in fully fixed contracts. So VAT and levies such as CCL or the introduction of new levies, they're set by government and they'll be charged at the prevailing rate. So they almost fall outside of the contract. For example, there was a new charge called the Green Gas Levy, which was introduced, I think it was last year, off the top of my head, but it's a few pennies per year on top of the cost. Another example is the government support package, which has been introduced. That's varied anyone's contract who's agreed since December 21 for a 6-month period. Despite it being a fixed contract, it's reduced your rates. In terms of the standing charge, that shouldn't change. There's a few scenarios in which it might. For example, if you get a bigger meter installed, it might change, or vice versa. There was an industry change called TCR, or Targeted Charging Review, last year, this year, which came in and suppliers interpreted in different ways. Some suppliers increased the standing charges intra-contract, but Crown and SSE was not one of those suppliers. It is relatively rare. Another question we had was, do churches have to use commercial tariffs or can they not use domestic tariffs? The simple answer is no. The national database has a flag on it which states whether a premises is domestic or commercial, and you've got to prove to the industry bodies that it is domestic. And there are other benefits. There's been charitable, as Craig's touched upon, reduced rate of VAT and no CCL on your invoices. A further question we had was about the timing of electricity and gas contracts that are expiring. We recommend for anyone who's got a contract expiring in March to get in touch as soon as possible to review the options available. At the moment, prices are suppressed, as you've seen in the graphs. They have reduced from previous highs, but it's a bit of a case-by-case basis at the moment. So we do encourage anyone for contract end date early next year to reach out sooner rather than later so that we can review the options now and then keep an eye on them up until the contract end date. For contracts ending next September, so the basket for Green Journey starts again next September. So anyone from that date we would probably look to encompass within the basket. However, we do encourage you to reach out again on a case-by-case basis so we can review what's best in every situation. We had a question about customers looking whether it's better to remain out of contract over the winter or to agree a short-term contract. So the government support scheme, there's been a lot of misinformation about it in the press and general discourse. In summary, the amount of the discount that you get for being out of contract is less generous than that given to customers in fixed contracts. So the maximum discount, I'll use electricity as an example. The maximum discount for electricity out of contract is 34.5 pence per kilowatt hour. The same discount for electricity under the scheme, if you agreed a contract last week, was 48.8 pence per kilowatt hour. So you're already 13.3 pence, 14.3 pence. Oh, I made that mistake yesterday as well, sorry. Out of contract rates are typically higher than in contract rates. So you start at a higher cost point and you get a lower reduction. As an easy example, if you're on an out of contract rate of 150 pence and you get a reduction of 34.5 pence, it still leaves you on a high rate. Conversely, if you enter a fixed contract at 90 pence per kilowatt hour, you would have a reduction of, say, 48.8 pence applied to that. So it is better to be in a contract over the winter period and not to remain out of contract. There is an exception to this, which is if you're with a supplier who's charging a competitive out of contract rate, for example, 84 pence, 90 pence, or circa what you can get out in a contract, then there's little benefit to changing. It'll be a nominal difference, but you do open yourself up to the risk of the price changing with 30 days notice over the winter as a variable rate. Again, if you want any advice or guidance on that, please do get in touch. So those were all the questions that were covered off yesterday. So I shall hand back to Jemima. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for that comprehensive summary. And yeah, seems to be a clear message of make sure you get into contract and think ahead there. Thank you. I'm going to hand to Ian just to talk us through the diocese's relationship with Green Journey.
Thank you, Jemima. Good afternoon, everyone. We set this scheme up back in 2015. At that time, we set it up because most of our churches, a lot of our churches were on brown energy rather than green energy. And what we wanted to do was to reduce CO2 emissions. And we've been very successful in doing that. That's why we called it Green Journey in the first place, because we were journeying from brown to green. One of the things that this threw up, though, was that many treasurers really didn't have experience of the energy market. A lot of treasurers were waiting for contracts to end and then accepting the new contract that was offered them by their existing supplier. And they were paying excessive prices. As Kevin mentioned, quite a lot of churches, it was about 1 in 8 churches were paying the wrong rate of VAT. They were paying 20% when they should have been paying the reduced rate, and they were paying climate change levy. So what the scheme has offered is better pricing for many, and the administration which he referred to, which is a real benefit, because treasurers are not really trained to understand the energy market. We do, within the scheme, there are different suppliers for different needs. Not all churches are the same. That's particularly true when we're looking at rural churches, and some of you will be from rural churches. The scheme at the moment is basically supplying carbon neutral gas and 100% renewable electric. And the job of the scrutiny committee is to liaise between the diocese and Green Energy Consulting to deal with any problems that might arise, although there haven't been very many of them, and to make sure that the churches are properly represented. So it is a great benefit, I do think, for treasurers. So many treasurers have kept on the contract that was arranged by a predecessor, perhaps one before, perhaps sort of 3 or 4 before, and have stayed with the same company. Loyalty does not get rewarded by energy companies in the same way as it doesn't seem to get rewarded by financial companies. So, you know, Green Journey have an understanding of ecclesiastical, they have an understanding of churches in particular. And as Craig said, you know, 250 of our churches are with Green Journey. There's 1,500 from other places, I think, that are also with them. And this scheme, which started in Diocese of Leeds, has expanded nationally. If anybody has any queries, we direct them either to myself, and on the diocesan website, there's a Green Journey page, which has my email address, which is ijf@fgco.com, or to Craig. So if anybody has any queries, you know, you're welcome to get in touch. Thank you, Jemima.
Thank you, Ian. And given that we are all facing this challenge of how do we reduce our energy bills, I just wanted to now spend a little bit of time just going quickly through some pointers, because this situation that we're all in is very challenging. And this is just going to be a very brief summary of possible actions that you could take to reduce your energy bills, and in so doing also your carbon emissions. But I appreciate that every church is different and you'll need to work out what would work in your context. And you might need to consult with your architect on some matters, or perhaps get in touch with the Archdeacon to see if you needed a faculty to for any of the changes that you might want to make. So 3 things in terms of reducing energy bills. The first is communication, the second, soft changes, and then hard changes. So starting off with communication, you might not have thought that was going to be the first one, but if we're going to make any changes in our church, either physical changes or the pattern of which we're doing things, we're going to need to bring the whole congregation on board so they understand, and you haven't got them complaining that things have changed. And we can also do a communication piece to the whole community, because we know that the whole of society is concerned at the moment about the cost of living rise, and we may be able to take an opportunity to share what we're doing as a church, and actually be a place where people can come and seek advice when they're struggling with their energy bills. So being a place where people can get advice is really helpful. And these are just a couple of places, the Energy Saving Trust and the Centre for Sustainable Energy, where there are a series of excellent leaflets on lowering your energy bills. Could be a way that as a church we can really bless both our congregations and our wider communities at the moment. The other opportunity that there is at this time is actually, while we're thinking about reducing our energy bills, to tie that in as it aligns very closely with our ambition to be carbon net zero. So actually thinking about how we can make a carbon net zero plan, as many of the actions that we'll be taking to reduce energy will also fit onto this plan. And there's a template plan on the diocesan website that might help you to do this. The Green Journey scheme is a really useful tool in helping every church get to carbon net zero, because once you've switched to 100% renewable electricity, you can wipe that off your carbon emissions account, as it were. And also having the carbon offset gas tariff enables you in the short term to discount that from your carbon emissions as well. So thinking about soft changes, thinking about our electricity use, clearly we need to be thinking about switching off our lights as much as possible, moving to LED lights if you haven't already, to reduce your electricity consumption from your lighting. Thinking about the flood lighting, do you need it on all the time? Would it be possible to just have flood lighting on for special occasions, so that on those times people really take notice of the church? And of course, appliances, making sure that they're not on standby, and you're switching everything off. Then if we're thinking about our heating in terms of soft changes, ensuring that you're scheduling meetings and services in the most energy efficient spaces, perhaps thinking about whether you can move the church services into smaller rooms if you have a hall, ones which are easier to heat through the colder winter months, and then thinking about where you hold PCC meetings. Perhaps it might be nicer and warmer in the pub than in the church. And if you can zone spaces in your church, then make use of that. In terms of comfort levels, we often feel cold because we're touching cold surfaces, and just think about whether you can put soft furnishings, cushions, curtains between yourself, between people and the cold surfaces. That can make a real difference. Then make sure you get to grips with your heating controls. Make sure you're setting your heating to come on only for just in time for services, and you maybe want to have back-to-back meetings, so that if you've heated the church for one event, think about what else can happen just afterwards. And if you don't have any heating controls, then make sure that you do think about installing those, because it can make a real difference to actually have controls. Radiators and pipes, make sure you do some cleaning so that your radiators are not dusty and not able to radiate heat as effectively. Insulate your pipes. Doorways and windows, think about any gaps around the windows that are letting drafts in, and doorways, make sure you've got somebody on the door to welcome people and keep the door shut when nobody's walking through it. That's a good way to stop losing heat from your building. And then as we go on to the hard changes, the long-term things, we know that the largest proportion of our energy use is our heating. So we really need to be thinking about our heating long-term and moving away from fossil fuel use. So thinking about how we can transition onto renewable heating systems that are more efficient. Do please make sure you monitor. So annually completing the online parish return energy footprinting tool and using the report from that in your annual reports so that you can track your progress towards net zero and monitoring your energy use. Then get to know your boiler. Hopefully it isn't quite as old as this one, but if it is, make sure you have a boiler resilience plan in place so that if your boiler fails, you know what your temporary solution is going to be while you are preparing to put in a new heating system, and planning and raising the funds for that. But in the meantime, make sure you know how to use your boiler really effectively, what works best for your boiler. Then if we look just very briefly at some of the heating options that are renewable because they are electric and you can run them on 100% electricity. There are two main choices, direct heating or space heating. And if you can think about heating the people rather than the space, that's a much more efficient way of using the energy than trying to heat some of our cavernous church buildings, which are very different from domestic spaces. So options include for direct heating, heated pew cushions, under pew heating, far infrared heating, and shortwave quartz halogen. And then for space heating, electric storage heaters, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and again, far infrared heating can be used for space heating as well. And I would highly recommend the Church of England electric heating webinar, which goes into more detail on this. If you'd like more detailed advice and guidance, the DAC have just produced a guidance note on saving energy. There's a Church of England guidance note on energy, economic, environmental and energy efficiency improvements. And there's also a Historic England guidance note on this topic. If you don't want to read something and you'd rather watch it, the DASIS have just produced the DAC team have just produced an energy saving video. And there are, as I said at the top of this session, some forthcoming DAC webinars on heating and energy saving. And there's also a couple of forthcoming quick energy saving webinars from the Church of England. And all those links will be on the slides for you. So I'm going to stop sharing as we move to our question time.